if you want to engage your audience when you're doing video conferencing, you need to level up your Zoom skills. So in this video, I'm going to share my 5 best tips that are going to help you stand out on Zoom in 2021. Welcome to the stream. We're going to jump right into the first tip, and the first tip is to start super strong. When we're doing video conferencing, we need to hook the audience immediately, and gone are the days when it was acceptable to start with something like, "Can you see my slides?" or "I hope you can all hear me." We are beyond that now, and we need to start much stronger. And one way to do that is with a strong hook. What could a hook be? For example, you could tell them exactly what you're going to be getting in this presentation, like I was just doing 30 seconds ago. Or you could ask the audience an interesting question that they can immediately engage in with the chat. For example, let me know where you're joining us from today. Put that in the chat. That's another way to start strong. And a third way is to share just an interesting fact that gets people's attention. But here's the thing. If you want to, the best way, however, to start an online presentation is actually to be introduced. Make sure that you get introduced, because the best way to start a presentation is with an amazing introduction by somebody else. So if you are presenting online or in person, just make sure that the host who's going to introduce you has your introduction so that they don't have to spend time on it and they get the wording right. Hey, welcome to the stream. My name is Markus. On this channel, I help you engage better with your audience, whether that's on stage or on video. Today, we're talking about video, but sometimes I also share tips about how you can be better on the TEDx stage, where I've been a couple of times, or on the comedy stage, because I'm also a stand-up comedian. Welcome to the stream, everybody. I'm happy that you are all here. Welcome, Callie. Welcome, Christy. And we're going to move over with the next tips here in just a moment. But just as before we move on to that, just note that there's links to everything I'm talking about in the description below this video. And one of the links you can pick up there is actually my free video conferencing checklist. There's a link there to markuspresents.com/checklist if you want to pick up mine. We're going to be talking a little bit more about checklist here coming up in a moment as well. Let's jump over to tip number 2 here, and that is to up your production value. When many of us started doing Zoom calls earlier this year, we were just using our laptop and the built-in microphone. And for anybody starting out, that's fine. But I think we are beyond that now. We need to, if we want to stand out on Zoom, we need to have a little bit more of a production value. Now, I've been using Zoom since 2015, so I had plenty of time to figure out how to do this. But I've actually put together a simple list for you that's going to allow you to up your production value as well. And I have a lot of videos about that on my channel. But in this next segment, I'm going to summarize my whole channel for you in 60 seconds. Are you ready? Let me know in the chat if you're ready for the 60-second summary. Here's the summary. It's ALVS. It stands for audio, lighting, video, environment, and stabilization. Audio, your microphone needs to be close to your mouth. Lighting, have all the lights in front of you, not behind you, not above you. Video, your camera needs to be at eye level. Environment, clear out your background and don't use virtual backgrounds. And stabilization, make sure that your device is on a stable surface. If you're using a laptop, definitely don't hold it on your lap, but it's probably better to use a phone or a real camera on a tripod. So that's my 60-second summary of what you can do to up your production value. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about these production values as we go on as well, because I'm going to give you some more ideas here about how you can do that. But if you only remember, these 5 things here with these 5 things that I'm showing you here. If you only remember audio, lighting, video, environment, and stabilization, you will already be ahead of the game when you are doing video conferencing. And sometimes people ask me, how does my setup actually look like? Well, I'm going to show you. This is my video conferencing setup that I also use for my YouTube videos and that I'm currently using for this live stream. You can see that there's a tripod to the left here, a little phone tripod. I have my real camera above my monitor. That's my Canon M50. And then I have that light to the top right there. And if you want to find all of the products that I'm using, there's actually links also in the description below to that. But this is my video conferencing setup. And my YouTube setup as well. And you can see that it's not particularly complicated. It's basically just a nice camera and on a tripod and one light. My main light source is my window, which also goes to show that you can definitely be better at video conferencing without any fancy equipment just by using a window, for example. By the way, you can see on the image there, you can see the little subscribe in the middle of the image. So definitely, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, click the big red subscribe button. Okay, let's move over to the next tip here, because it kind of follows up on this idea that we should be leveling up our production value. By the way, if you've already gotten value from these 2 tips that we shared, hit the like button for me. Okay, let's move over to tip number 3. And tip number 3 is to learn from video producers. Because here's the thing about video conferencing, whether you realize it or not, you are doing a video production. So who should we learn from when it comes to video production? Well, there's 2 broad categories. If we look at who is able to do, kind of as a solo creator, who's able to do high quality video basically from their home? Well, one answer to that is YouTubers. So if you want to improve your video conferencing setup, looking at how YouTubers have set up their studio is actually an excellent place to start. Most of them are doing it with consumer grade goods, not professional equipment, and they're doing it from their home. So look at your favorite YouTubers. How have they set up their studio? You can probably tell by the way they light themselves, by the way they frame themselves, what the equipment they use, how you can actually get better. But there's another source of information that you could use, and that is live streamers. So you're watching a live stream now, obviously this is more of a training, but the most typical live streamers are people who are playing games live. And let me know if you ever watch any live streamers. So on Twitch, for example, what they're doing at the same time, they are playing their game, they are concentrating on playing their game. At the same time, they're also chatting with their audience and with their teammates, plus they're doing a full-blown video production at the same time as a solo creator, as just one person. So that's another source that you can learn from if you want to get better at video production, is to look at YouTubers and live streamers. And we're going to jump over to a couple of Q&A questions at the end of this stream as well, so stay tuned, but we have a couple of more tips to go. I promised you 5 tips, it's actually going to be 6 because we are going to do a bonus tip as well. And tip number 4, no, actually, before I move over to tip number 4, I almost forgot. So the other place where you should look at inspiration for video production is, of course, professional productions like television, like movies. And one of the things that you may notice is that they have lots of multiple angles, and they're kind of like a music video. Often will switch scenes or angles or cameras every second. A movie may do it every 3 seconds. Pay attention to this the next time you look at a professional production. So how does this relate to video conferencing? Well, the reason why all these productions shift angles and scenes so quickly is to retain attention. And this is, of course, one of the biggest problems with video conferencing is that it's difficult to retain attention. So by spicing up your production with something like this is a really powerful tool. And there's a term for this. It's called a pattern interrupt. Now, when you're just doing it by yourself, there's not so much you can do to interrupt the pattern, but one thing I can do in my stream, for example, that I can switch between this slide view of myself and then I can switch back to the full screen. That's already a pattern interrupt. And you may also notice that I'm using different colors on my slides, so that's another pattern interrupt. So this is something that you can do in a video conference as well. Because what does a video conference usually look like? It's either just your face on the screen, or it's a deck of slides. It's those slides, those slides that I hate so much. So can you imagine if instead of, let's say, can you imagine if I had this slide on here, just for 45 minutes, just the same kind of view, how boring that is? Of course you can, but the fact that I can switch between these 2 views is something that can really add a lot. And the way I'm doing this, if you want to replicate exactly what I'm doing this, I'm using OBS Studio. And the cool thing about OBS Studio is that you can use this with Zoom as well. So you can set up OBS Studio and use the virtual camera, bring that virtual camera into Zoom, and then you can do exactly what I'm doing here, switching slides and things like that, plus many other things. So that's the real power tip for you. Try when you're doing Zoom video conferencing, try to use OBS Studio and the virtual camera, and you will instantly up your production value, and you're gonna immediately stand out. Okay, so I already teased that I was going to move over to tip number 4. Let's actually move over to tip number 4, and that is to have a checklist and update it. Having a checklist is good, but updating it is key. So, of course, if you want to use my checklist, you can download it from the links below the video. It's markuspresents.com/checklist. But even if you don't use mine, use your own. That will then be adapted to your own setup. And I recommend including everything there about audio, video, stabilization, all these things that we talked about in the ALVS formula, and also your own personal settings. I'll tell you what's on my list, for example. This is not going to be relevant to you, but for my setup, I need to increase the audio gain on my sound card to plus 20 decibels when I'm using my headset microphone, for example. So that's one of the things that I have on my checklist. It's not going to be relevant to you, but that's one of the things that I have on there. And then, of course, like I'm saying here, also update it. Definitely make sure to update it when you learn new things. And if I look at my own updates, very rarely has it been the case that I thought, wow, that went well, I'm going to add that to the list. No, it's almost always the case that it was something that went horribly wrong. And we're going to come back to that a little bit later as well. So if you want to use my checklist, if you make your own, I think this is really key. And then just go through it. And so when we are updating, when we are increasing our production value, of course, not everybody needs I'm just going to go back. So not everybody needs a fancy setup with an external light and with a $600 camera like I have here. But I think it's all, like, if you want to stand out, it's also not enough to just use your laptop. If you do want to stand out, you need to increase some of these things a little bit. So, and as you do that, definitely your checklist is going to be much more important, because there's many more things that you need to sort out on your checklist. Okay, let's move on. Hey, hit the like button if you've been getting value from these tips already, as we move over to the next tip. And this is tip number 5. And this is a little bit more introspective, but I think it's going to yield some useful results. Tip number 5 is to observe yourself. Think of what is it when you are attending video conferencing, what is it that makes you bored or not engaged? Because there's so many problems with video conferencing today. One is that there's too much of them, right? There's too many of them, they're too frequent, they're too long, that's one part of it. Another part is that they're boring. It is difficult to engage with people. It's difficult to reach them, especially if people have their cameras off. You don't really know if they're actually engaging with the content or if they're reading emails at the same time. And of course, there's the even worse version when the camera is on and you see their eyes kind of reading emails instead. So there's lots of things. And the last problem is that there's too many slides. Right? There's this idea that there always needs to be a slide on the video conference, and I certainly recommend you to move away from that idea. So observe yourself and think of what is it that I'm observing in other people that is boring me. For example, if I'm sitting through a 45-minute presentation where there's only slides, why would I then go and make my audience suffer by using a 45-minute slide presentation? Don't do it. So I think observing yourself and what works for you as an audience member is absolutely key. Put yourself in the shoes of your audience members. Okay, let's move over to I'm actually going to move over to my bonus tip here in just a moment. But hey, if you've been getting value from this video, please consider subscribing to my channel. I post a new video here every Thursday, and they're always about helping you engage better with your audience, whether on stage or on video. And sometimes it's both, because I do a lot of content about hybrid meetings. So in hybrid meetings, you have people in a room together and you have virtual attendees joining the same meeting as well. Plus, I also share some of my stand-up comedy clips, and if you want to check out my comedy course, you can also do that. That's comedyforbeginners.com. And I've tried to bring the things that I've learned from the stand-up comedy stage onto the virtual stage as well. So that's a really key part of what I'm doing on the channel. Lots of good tips there. Definitely consider subscribing. Here's the bonus tip that I want to give you as well. It is to experiment and tolerate failure. Because here's the thing, if you are going to move away from something other than just your laptop, sometimes it's going to go wrong. But the key is to constantly try to improve your setup. It is going to go wrong, and I'll just give you one example. A couple of weeks ago, I did a live stream similar to this one, and the topic was going to be about how to increase the quality of your lighting. So I was going to do a longer discussion about everything you need to know about lighting and looking good. And everything was looking wonderful. I sent out the email to everybody on my email list, and I had published the thing, and then nobody saw the stream. Why? Because the event was listed as private. The stream on YouTube was listed as private and not as public. So actually nobody could physically see it, even though, and it's something that changed right at the start. So it was a massive failure. The live stream that nobody saw, it's not really worth a lot, right? But I learned something. And I definitely updated my live streaming checklist. And now there's a line on that updated live streaming checklist that says, remember to make your stream public. Obvious, right? But this is the thing, like you have to experiment. If you want to get better, if you want to stand out in video conferencing, you have to experiment with new things that you're not familiar with. And it needs to be better than just opening up your laptop. So definitely experiment and tolerate failure. You can definitely learn a lot from that. Yeah, I'm going to jump over to some Q&A here in just a moment. But if you do want to find out more about how having great video quality in your video conference can actually help you as a speaker, check out the link on the screen right now. That's my video about how video quality is going to increase your confidence and your brand as a speaker. And I'm going to put that link in the description as well. Hey, hit the like button, and we are going to move over to some Q&A here as I make a slight adjustment to my setup and move over to the chat. So if you have any questions, I'll be very happy to answer them. Anything that you might want to know about live streaming or video conferencing or YouTube or whatever it is, hybrid meetings, I'll be very happy to pick your questions off the chat. Just going to grab a little glass of water, and then I'll be happy to take your questions. Okay, let me scroll down to the chat. So we have a question from Harry. Let's see what Harry says. How to find live streamers? Okay, yes. How does one find live streamers? Okay, so live streaming typically, let's see. I'm going to split this into two parts. The kind of archetypal live streamers are people who are streaming video games. So they're playing the games with their team and they're streaming that onto the internet. And the major platform for that is a system called Twitch, twitch.tv. And it is a platform mostly for streaming of games. It has grown. There's other types of live streaming happening on Twitch as well. And it has all the kind of infrastructure that you might need for integrating with your live streaming software. So it's very advanced, but it's mostly for gamers. However, there are other people doing it as well. People who are just chatting, connecting with their audience, or they might be playing board games or making art or playing music or something like that. So twitch.tv is the archetypal answer to live streaming, especially of games. However, what I'm doing right now is also a live stream, right? This is a live stream on YouTube, and YouTube is also let's see, I would say it's probably the live streaming platform of the future. It is growing because there's so many different types of content on YouTube, not only games, right? So I'm doing a Q&A about Zoom. Somebody else might be doing a Q&A about how to grow on YouTube. There's so much live streaming content on YouTube as well, and I think you can also search for live streams on the YouTube either app or on the YouTube homepage. So learning from these live streamers is actually really fantastic, and I watch a lot of videos about how to. I watch a lot of live streams about how to get better at YouTube, and these are people who have been live streaming for 2 years, and they still mess up things. There's still technical difficulties. There's things that go wrong, and these are professionals with millions and millions of followers, and it just shows you that live streaming is probably the most difficult public speaking scenario that I'm aware of. Because there's the technical aspect, there's the fact that it's live, there's the fact that it's public. It can be very stressful. But yeah, definitely a lot of live streams on YouTube as well. And what YouTube is good at is that you can search for topics. Of course, there's also Facebook Live. But Facebook Lives, they're a little bit more difficult to find, and I think that's not the future of live streaming. I think. So definitely check out Twitch and YouTube to find live streamers, and I'm sure you're going to find a lot of cool people to learn from. Absolutely. Let's see. I'm going to read my comments here. I'm just going to clearly just take one moment to read the comment here from Harry. Okay. Yes, Harry was asking, what did I do to adjust my setup? Well, I'm actually going to tell you. So my standard setup, because I'm using OBS to stream this, so my standard setup is that I have the live broadcast on this side, and then I have the kind of studio where I have the slides which are not live on this side. And when I adjust my setup, I look at the chat instead. So I'm actually leaving OBS Studio, and I'm looking here at the chat instead. But I also have to increase the size a little bit because because of my poor eyesight. That's why I get them leaning in all the time. The cool thing about something like OBS Studio, which most Twitch streamers use, is that they can actually integrate the chat into their studio. I'm not doing that. That's too fancy for me. But that's actually another way you can do that as well. So yeah, that's the small adjustment that I did there. If there's any more questions, I'd be happy to answer them as well. Happy that you guys are all here, Harry and Callie and Christy. Happy that you guys are joining me from all over the world. So do put them in the chat, and if not, I'll be happy to call it the day there as well and go grab some ice cream. Perfect December treat. Okay, let's have a look here. Okay, well, it seems like we are out of questions from this time. I want to thank all of you for joining me here on the stream, and I'm going to put a link to that video where I talked about how video quality can actually make you a better, more confident speaker that gets easier to book. I'm going to put that in the link below this video and on the end screen as well. So thank you very much for joining us for this live stream, and I will see you in the next one.